Hashtag married as punishment. She found unexpected kindness in a human. The crystalline towers of Zephyria Prime gleamed under the twin suns as Lyralii stood before the High Council, her violet skin pale with dread. The ornate chamber buzzed with whispered conversations in various alien tongues, but all she could hear was the thundering of her own heart. Today would determine the rest of her life, and she already knew it wouldn't be pleasant. Lyralii Vexindra of House Silva Moon. The council speaker's voice boomed through the chamber, his four arms gesturing dramatically. You stand accused of violating the sacred trade protocols by interfering with a sanctioned slave transport. How do you answer these charges? Lyralii lifted her chin, her silver eyes flashing with defiance despite her trembling hands. I answer that no being should be treated as property, regardless of what your protocols say. The gasp from the gallery made her flinch, but she continued. I freed those Terrari children because it was the right thing to do. The council speaker, a massive vorthack with skin like molten rock, leaned forward menacingly. The right thing? You speak of right and wrong when you have violated laws that have maintained peace between our species for 3 centuries. His voice dripped with contempt. Your naive idealism has cost House Silvermoon considerable reputation and 3 million credits in damages. Lyralii's father, Lord Kethrin Silvermoon, sat rigidly in the family section, his normally proud bearing defeated. He had already disowned her publicly to save face with the other noble houses. The sight of his disappointment cut deeper than any punishment the council could devise. The penalty for such a grave offense is traditionally exile to the Outer Rim territories. The speaker continued, savoring each word. However, given your family's previous standing in society, we have decided on an alternative punishment that will serve as a deterrent to others who might consider similar acts of rebellion. A holographic display materialized above the chamber, showing images of various alien species. Lyralii's blood ran cold as she recognized what was happening. An arranged marriage, the ultimate humiliation for someone of her former status. You will be wed to maintain diplomatic relations with one of our newer allies, the speaker announced with satisfaction. The marriage will be binding under galactic law and cannot be dissolved without mutual consent from both parties and their respective governments. The hologram cycled through several species, each more frightening than the last. The militaristic Threxians with their razor-sharp carapaces. The hive-minded Kretar, who absorbed the personalities of their mates. The parasitic Molari, who literally consumed their partner's life essence over time. Lyralii felt her knees grow weak as she imagined spending her life with any of these creatures. Then, the hologram stopped on an image that made the entire chamber fall silent. A human male stood in what appeared to be a garden, tending to strange flowering plants. He looked young by human standards, perhaps in his 30s, with brown hair touched by sunlight and kind eyes that seemed to smile even in a still image. Most shocking of all, he appeared to be alone. No servants, no guards, no signs of the brutal dominance that characterized most species powerful enough to warrant diplomatic marriages. This is Dr. Marcus Chun of Earth, the speaker announced, his tone suggesting this was somehow the worst option of all. A scientist and agricultural specialist currently stationed on the frontier world of Kepler 442b. The human government has agreed to this union as part of their ongoing integration into our galactic community. Confused murmurs rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew humans were a recent addition to galactic society, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were considered primitive by most standards, barely having moved beyond their home system. Their technology was crude, their society chaotic, and their military laughably small. Being married to a human was considered barely a step above exile. A human, Lyralii whispered, not sure if she felt relief or further despair. She had heard stories about humans, how they were emotional to the point of instability, how they formed irrational attachments to other species, how they wept over the deaths of small animals. Some called them the bleeding hearts of the galaxy for their naive belief that all sentient life had value. Indeed, the speaker's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. You showed such concern for lesser beings. Now you can spend your life with one of the most primitive species in known space. Perhaps living among humans will teach you the value of the natural order. The gavel struck with finality. Lyralii Vexandra, you are hereby sentenced to binding marriage with a human Marcus Chun. Transport will be arranged within the week. May this union serve as a reminder that actions have consequences. As the chamber began to empty, Lyralii remained frozen in place, staring at the hologram of her future husband. He looked so ordinary, not cruel or imposing like the Threxians, not coldly calculating like the Zenthari, just ordinary. Part of her had expected to feel relief that she wasn't being sent to a warrior culture or a hive mind, but instead she felt a strange hollowness. Her former friend, Valana, approached cautiously, her blue skin flickering with the nervous patterns that betrayed her anxiety. Lyra, I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do. There's nothing anyone can do, Lyralii replied quietly, still staring at the human's image. I made my choice when I freed those children. I knew there would be consequences. But a human, Lyra, they're so strange. I heard they actually form emotional bonds with their mates. Not political or economic alliances, but actual feelings. Valana's tone suggested this was somehow perverse. And they live such short lives. Barely a century at most. You'll outlive him by hundreds of years. Lyralii, finally, turned away from the hologram, her silver eyes dull with resignation. Maybe that's the point. A lifetime of loneliness after a brief, awkward partnership with a primitive alien. The council certainly knows how to craft a punishment. As she walked through the corridors of the council building for what would likely be the last time, Lyralii tried to imagine what her life would be like. The stories about humans were contradictory and confusing. Some said they were violent and unpredictable, capable of great cruelty. Others insisted they were weak and overly sentimental, crying over injured animals and forming attachments to inanimate objects. She had never met a human personally. Few members of the inner worlds had. They were still mostly confined to their frontier territories, slowly expanding outward with their inadequate technology. The fact that they had been deemed worthy of a diplomatic marriage at all was surprising. Perhaps their government had something the council wanted. Her personal transport was waiting outside, piloted by Jexton, who had served her family for 30 years. His weathered face showed none of the judgment she had faced in the chamber, only gentle sympathy. "Where to, Lady Lyralii?" he asked, using her title despite her disgrace. "Home, I suppose. I need to prepare for my new life." The words felt strange on her tongue. A new life with a human she had never met, on a world she had never seen, far from everything familiar. As the transport lifted off, carrying her away from the crystalline towers of her birth, Lyralii pressed her palm against the window and watched her old life shrink into the distance. In less than a week, she would be married to a primitive alien scientist on a frontier world. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt only numbness. At least, she told herself, it couldn't be worse than marriage to a Threxian warrior or a Molari parasite. Though as the transport carried her toward an uncertain future, she wondered if that was really true. Sometimes the unknown was more frightening than the obviously terrible. The twin suns set behind the crystal towers, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Lyralii watched the familiar sunset and wondered if the skies would be different on Kepler 442b. If her new husband would be different from everything she had been told about humans. If perhaps, in a galaxy full of creatures seeking to use and dominate each other, a primitive species might have something else to offer. But that, she told herself firmly, was just wishful thinking. Punishment was punishment, regardless of how it was dressed up. She would serve her sentence with dignity and try not to expect too much from a marriage built on political necessity rather than choice. The transport flew on through the gathering darkness, carrying her toward a future she never could have imagined. #married as punishment. She found unexpected kindness in a human. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 days aboard a sterile diplomatic transport. Lyralii spent most of the time staring out the viewport at the swirling colors of hyperspace, trying to prepare herself for what was to come. The ship's automated systems provided her with basic information about her destination and her husband-to-be, but the data was clinical and cold. Dr. Marcus Chun, age 34, agricultural scientist specializing in xenobotany and soil regeneration. No previous marriages. No criminal record. currently engaged in a terraforming project on Kepler 442b to establish sustainable farming communities for human colonists. The file included his educational background, work history, and a few more photos that showed him in various work settings, always alone, always focused on plants or soil samples. What the files didn't tell her was anything about his personality, his expectations for their marriage, or how he felt about being assigned a wife as part of a political arrangement. For all she knew, he might be as unhappy about this situation as she was. The transport finally dropped out of hyperspace near a modest blue-green world orbited by 2 small moons. Kepler 442b looked surprisingly Earth-like, with vast oceans and continents covered in what appeared to be native vegetation. The human colony was located on the largest continent, a collection of simple structures that seemed almost primitive compared to the soaring cities of the inner worlds. As they descended through the atmosphere, Lyralii could see vast fields of crops arranged in neat geometric patterns. Gardens and orchards dotted the landscape between residential areas. Everything looked so peaceful, so organized without being oppressive. She had expected something more crude from a human settlement. The shuttle landed at a small spaceport that was little more than a cleared field with basic landing facilities. No ceremonial arches, no crowds of onlookers, no fanfare at all. Just a simple building and a few humans going about their daily business. It was almost disappointing how ordinary it all seemed. A single figure waited near the landing pad, and Lyralii's breath caught as she recognized Marcus Chun from his photos. He was taller than she had expected. Humans were generally larger than her species, and dressed in simple work clothes that had seen better days. His brown hair was slightly messed, as if he had been working in the wind, and there was soil under his fingernails. As she stepped off the shuttle with her single bag of belongings, Marcus approached with a hesitant smile. Up close, she could see that his eyes were green rather than brown as they had appeared in the photos, and they held an expression of nervous kindness that she hadn't expected. Lady Lyralii? His voice was deeper than she had anticipated, with a gentle quality that surprised her. I'm Marcus Chen. Well, I suppose I'm your husband-to-be. He extended his hand in what she recognized as a human greeting gesture, then seemed to remember that other species might not share the custom, and let it drop awkwardly to his side. Dr. Chun, she replied formally, unsure of what else to say. The formal title seemed to amuse him rather than please him. Just Marcus, please. We don't stand much on ceremony here. He gestured toward a simple ground vehicle parked nearby. I thought you might want to see your new home before we take care of the official business. The drive through the colony revealed a community that was both more advanced and more primitive than she had expected. The buildings were constructed from local materials, but incorporated sophisticated environmental systems. Gardens flourished everywhere, not just with food crops, but with decorative plants that served no purpose other than beauty. Children played in parks filled with strange earth plants that had been carefully adapted to the local environment. It's not much compared to what you're used to, Marcus said as they drove, glancing at her sideways. I know this whole situation must be difficult for you. I want you to know that I didn't ask for this any more than you did. His honesty surprised her. Most aliens would have pretended that the arrangement was desirable, that she should feel honored to be chosen. You don't want a wife? She asked, immediately regretting how blunt the question sounded. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. I believe marriage should be a choice made by people who care about each other, not a political arrangement between governments. He paused, but since we're both stuck with this situation, I'd like to try to make it as comfortable as possible for both of us. They pulled up in front of a modest house surrounded by the most beautiful garden Lyralii had ever seen. The structure was built from warm-colored local stone and native timber, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. But it was the garden that took her breath away. Flowers and colors she had never seen before bloomed alongside vegetables and fruit trees from a dozen different worlds. The arrangement seemed chaotic at first glance, but she could see the underlying design, different plants grouped according to their needs, and growing patterns, creating a harmonious ecosystem. You did this? She asked, stepping out of the vehicle to get a closer look. Marcus nodded, suddenly looking shy. It's my hobby, I suppose. Creating sustainable growing systems that can support multiple species. This garden produces food for my table year-round, while also providing habitat for native pollinator insects and birds. He pointed to a section where earth roses grew alongside alien flowering vines. I've been experimenting with cross-species companion planting. Some earth plants actually help certain alien species grow better, and vice versa. Lyralii walked slowly through the garden paths, marveling at the complexity and beauty of what he had created. On her homeworld, gardens were formal affairs maintained by servants according to strict aesthetic principles. This felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. The house has 3 bedrooms, Marcus said as he led her inside. I thought you might want your own space until we figure out how this is going to work. The interior was comfortable and welcoming, with natural materials and simple furnishings that somehow felt more luxurious than the ornate palace room she had grown up in. You've been thinking about this, she observed, ever since I got the notification from Earth Command. They didn't give me much choice in the matter, but they did give me time to prepare. He showed her to a bedroom that had clearly been prepared with her comfort in mind. Extra soft bedding, adjustable lighting to accommodate different species' vision needs, even a small selection of books about Zephyrian culture. I don't understand, Lyralii said, sinking into a chair by the window. Why would your government agree to this arrangement? What do humans gain from marrying their citizens to convicted criminals? Marcus sat across from her, his expression serious. You're not a criminal. You're someone who risked everything to help children who couldn't help themselves. His words were quiet but firm. When Earth Command told me about your situation, I volunteered. You volunteered? The concept was so alien to her that she couldn't quite process it. You chose this. I chose to help someone who needed help. The marriage is just the legal framework that makes it possible. He leaned forward slightly. Look, I know this isn't what either of us planned for our lives, but maybe we can make something good out of it anyway. Lyralii stared at him, trying to understand what kind of person would volunteer to marry a stranger as a form of charity. Everything she had been taught about relationships was based on advantage, status, and political necessity. The idea that someone might enter a marriage simply to help another person was completely foreign to her worldview. What do you expect from me? She asked finally. As your wife. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. Companionship, maybe friendship, if we're lucky. I'm not expecting intimate relations, if that's what you're worried about. Not unless, and until that's something you want to. The relief that flooded through her was so intense, it was almost painful. She had been preparing herself for demands that would make her marriage a different kind of prison. Instead, this strange human was offering her something she hadn't dared to hope for. Choice. I don't understand your species, she admitted. Everything I was taught about humans suggested you were primitive and emotionally unstable. Marcus laughed, a warm sound that filled the comfortable room. We probably are emotionally unstable by galactic standards. We form attachments to things and people that other species consider irrational. We grieve for short-lived pets and get upset when our favorite plants die. He gestured toward the garden visible through the window. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. As the local sun set, painting the sky in unfamiliar but beautiful shades, Marcus prepared a simple dinner using vegetables from his garden. Lyralii found herself watching him work, noting the careful attention he paid to each ingredient, the way he hummed softly to himself as he cooked. There was a contentment in his movements that she had rarely seen in anyone, let alone in someone facing an arranged marriage to a stranger. Tomorrow we'll have the ceremony, he said as they ate. Just a simple legal proceeding. The colony administrator will handle the paperwork, and then we'll figure out what comes next. What comes next? She repeated. Whatever we want, I suppose. You can help with my research if you're interested. Or explore the colony. Find something else that interests you. We have a small library, some workshops, plenty of open land if you want to start your own projects. He paused. This doesn't have to be a prison sentence, Lyralii. It could be a new beginning. That night, lying in a comfortable bed in a room that was hers to use as she pleased, Lyralii stared up at the unfamiliar stars visible through her window. For the first time since her trial, she felt something other than despair. Not happiness exactly, but a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, her punishment might turn out to be something else entirely. Outside, night-blooming flowers filled the air with sweet perfume, and somewhere in the distance, She could hear Marcus moving quietly through his garden, checking on his plants one last time before sleep. The sound was oddly comforting, the gentle attentiveness of someone who cared for growing things. Perhaps, she thought as she finally drifted off to sleep, there were worse fates than being married to a man who could make flowers bloom in harmony. #married as punishment. She found unexpected kindness in a human. The wedding ceremony was nothing like what Lyralii had expected. No grand cathedral, no hundreds of witnesses, no elaborate rituals that would bind her soul to someone else's for eternity. Instead, she found herself standing in Marcus's garden on a bright morning, wearing a simple dress she had chosen from the few belongings she had been allowed to bring. Marcus wore clean work clothes and had even managed to get most of the soil out from under his fingernails. Colony Administrator Sarah Mitchell, a sturdy human woman in her 50s, conducted the brief legal ceremony with warm efficiency. A handful of Marcus's neighbors attended, bringing small gifts of food and flowers that they presented with genuine smiles. No one seemed to regard this as a punishment or a political necessity. To them, it appeared to be simply a wedding. Do you, Marcus Chun, take Lyralii Vexandra to be your lawfully wedded wife, to respect and support her in accordance with the laws of Earth and the Galactic Alliance? I do, Marcus said quietly, his green eyes meeting hers with steady kindness. And do you, Lyralii Vexandra, take Marcus Chun to be your lawfully wedded husband, to respect and support him in accordance with the laws of Zephyria Prime and the Galactic Alliance? Lyralii hesitated for just a moment, not from reluctance, but from amazement at how normal this felt. I do, she replied, and was surprised to find that she meant it. Then, by the power vested in me by the Colonial Authority and the Galactic Alliance, I pronounce you husband and wife. May you find happiness together on this new world. There was no kiss, no formal exchange of rings or binding artifacts. Just a gentle handshake between them, and applause from the small gathering of humans who had welcomed her without question into their community. The reception was held in the community center, a simple building that served as both meeting hall and social center for the colony. Lyralii found herself overwhelmed by the casual friendliness of the other colonists. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the colony's medical officer, regaled her with stories of her own courtship with her wife, a fellow researcher. Thomas and Maria Santos, who ran the colony's main farming cooperative, insisted on teaching her a traditional earth dance that left everyone laughing when she stumbled through the steps. Welcome to Kepler, 442b, said James Wright, the colony's chief engineer, raising a glass of some local fruit wine. We're glad to have you as part of our community. Community. The word stuck with her as the afternoon wore on. These humans didn't seem to see her as an outsider or a political inconvenience. They saw her as Marcus's wife, and therefore as one of them. The easy acceptance was so different from the rigid social hierarchies of her home world that she felt almost dizzy with the freedom of it. As evening fell, Marcus walked her home through the garden paths he had created throughout the colony. Bioluminescent earth fireflies danced among alien, night-blooming flowers, creating a light show that took her breath away. I've never seen anything like this, she murmured, watching the tiny lights flicker among the petals. I introduced them last year, Marcus explained. They don't harm the native ecosystem, and they help with pollination of the night-blooming species. He paused by a particularly beautiful cluster of flowers that seemed to glow with their own inner light. I thought you might like them. They reminded me of the bioluminescent gardens in the photos of Zephyria Prime. The fact that he had researched her home world, that he had tried to create something that might remind her of home, touched her in a way she hadn't expected. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said simply. I know this must all be very strange for you. I thought maybe having something familiar might help. They reached their house. She was still getting used to thinking of it as their house, and Marcus hesitated at the door. I want you to know, he said carefully, that nothing has to change just because we've gone through the legal ceremony. Your room is still your room. Your choices are still your choices. Lyralii studied his face in the soft light from the bioluminescent garden. Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. I know you risked everything to save children you didn't even know. I know you chose to do what you thought was right, even when you knew it would cost you everything you cared about. He met her eyes directly, That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that surprised Lyralii with its comfortable normalcy. Marcus left early each morning to work on his various agricultural projects around the colony, always returning by evening with stories of his day and often with samples of new plants or fruits he thought she might find interesting. She spent her days exploring the colony, reading in the small but well-stocked library, and gradually becoming involved in the community life that seemed to revolve around helping each other with various projects. Dr. Rodriguez convinced her to help in the medical center, where her knowledge of Zephyrian physiology proved useful when other aliens visited the colony. The Santos family taught her about Earth-style farming techniques that were surprisingly sophisticated despite their apparent simplicity. Engineer Wright showed her the colony's power systems, which used a fascinating combination of solar collection and geothermal energy that worked in harmony with the natural environment. But it was the evenings she treasured most. Marcus would cook dinner using vegetables from his garden, and they would sit together on the porch overlooking the valley where the colony nestled. They talked about everything and nothing: his research into sustainable agriculture, her memories of growing up in the crystal towers of Zephyria Prime, the strange beauty of the alien sunsets that painted the sky in colors neither Earth nor Zephyria had ever seen. "I've been thinking," Marcus said one evening as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky, "about what you did, freeing those children." Lyralii tensed slightly. Even here, in this peaceful place, the memory of her trial still had the power to bring back the shame and fear she had felt. What about it? It must have been terrifying knowing what the consequences would be, but doing it anyway. She was quiet for a long moment, remembering the moment when she had seen the Terrari children huddled in the transport cages, their large eyes filled with hopeless terror. I couldn't just walk away. They were so young, so frightened. The Vorthack traders were talking about what good prices they would bring in the pleasure districts. The memory still made her sick. How did you get them out? I used my family's codes to override the transport locks during a refueling stop. The children scattered into the station's ventilation system before anyone could stop them. She smiled slightly at the memory. Terrari are excellent climbers. The traders never had a chance of catching them once they got into the maintenance tunnels. Marcus was quiet for a while, processing this information. "You saved them," he said finally. "I probably just delayed the inevitable. There are always more traders, more transports." The pessimism in her voice surprised her. She hadn't meant to sound so bitter. "Maybe," Marcus agreed. "But those specific children are free now. They have a chance at real lives instead of—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Sometimes that's all we can do. Save the ones we can reach." Something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "You sound like you speak from experience." Marcus nodded slowly. "Before I came here, I worked on Earth's agricultural recovery projects, trying to restore farmland that had been destroyed by climate change and industrial pollution." He gestured toward his thriving garden. "It was frustrating work. For every acre we managed to rehabilitate, 10 more were lost to rising seas or extreme weather. But we kept working anyway, because the alternative was giving up completely." "Is that why you came here? To start over?" "Partly," Marcus admitted, "but mostly because I wanted to help build something new instead of just trying to fix what was broken." He turned to look at her directly. "When they told me about your situation, I saw a chance to help someone who was trying to build something better too." The comparison surprised her. She had never thought of what she had done as building something better, just as responding to an injustice she couldn't ignore. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe choosing to act according to your conscience, even when the cost was enormous, was a kind of building. "What was your family like?" Marcus asked one evening as they worked together in his garden. Over the past few weeks, Lyralii had begun helping with a more delicate cultivation work, and she had discovered that she had an unexpected talent for it. "Complicated," Lyralii replied, carefully transplanting seedlings of a new hybrid plant Marcus had been developing. "My father was Lord Kethrin Silvermoon, one of the most powerful nobles on Zephyria Prime." She paused in her work. "He's not a cruel man, but he's very focused on duty and tradition. He truly believed that maintaining the social order was more important than individual conscience. He disowned you to protect the family reputation." "Yes, but I think he also believed it was a kindness. If he hadn't, the council might have punished our entire house." She sat back on her heels, looking at the neat rows of growing plants. "I understand why he did it. I wish he could have understood why I did what I did. Marcus set down his own tools and moved to sit beside her. Maybe someday he will. I doubt it. The Vorthack have lodged formal complaints about the lost revenue from that slave transport. My father is probably dealing with trade sanctions and diplomatic pressure because of my actions. She brushed soil from her hands, a gesture that had become automatic over the past weeks. He was right to distance himself from me. No, Marcus said firmly. He was wrong to abandon his daughter for doing the right thing. His voice held an edge of anger that surprised her. Families should support each other, especially when the cost of doing right is high. The conviction in his voice made her curious about his own family. What about your parents? How did they feel about you volunteering for this marriage? Marcus was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, my parents died when I was 15. Agricultural accident back on Earth. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she could hear the old pain beneath the words. I was raised by my aunt and uncle after that. Good people, but they had their own children to worry about. I am sorry. I didn't know. It's okay. It was a long time ago. He stood up and brushed the soil from his knees. But I suppose it's part of why I understand what it feels like to lose your family because of circumstances beyond your control. That night, lying in her comfortable bed and listening to the alien night sounds outside her window, Lyralii found herself thinking about the conversation. Marcus had lost his parents and been raised by relatives who cared for him, but didn't really consider him their own. She had lost her father's approval and been cut off from everything she had ever known. Perhaps that shared understanding of loss was part of what made their unlikely partnership work. She had expected marriage to a human to be awkward and uncomfortable, full of misunderstandings and cultural barriers. Instead, she had found something she had never experienced before, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than political advantage or social obligation. Marcus asked nothing from her except her company, and gave freely of his own time, knowledge, and gentle friendship. It was, she realized with some surprise, the first time in her life that she had felt truly safe with another person. Safe to be herself, to express her opinions, to make mistakes without fear of judgment or punishment. The irony was not lost on her that she had found this safety in what was supposed to be her punishment. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she found herself wondering what it would be like to choose this life rather than have it imposed on her. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful in its implications. #married as punishment. She found unexpected kindness in a human 3 months into their marriage. Everything changed when an unexpected visitor arrived at the colony. Lyralii was working in the greenhouse, carefully monitoring the growth rate of a new species of grain that Marcus hoped could thrive in the colony's unique soil conditions, when the proximity alarms began sounding. She looked up to see a sleek Zephyrian diplomatic vessel descending toward the landing field, its crystalline hull gleaming in the afternoon sun. Her blood turned to ice. There could be only one reason for a diplomatic ship to come to this remote human colony, and that was to bring news she didn't want to hear. Perhaps the council had decided that marriage to a human wasn't sufficient punishment after all. Perhaps they had come to take her back for additional sentencing. Marcus found her there 20 minutes later, still frozen among the growing plants, staring out the greenhouse windows of the landed ship. "Hey," he said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Colony Administrator Mitchell wants to see us both. There's apparently someone here who wants to speak with you." Lyralii nodded numbly, unable to trust her voice. She had known this peace was too good to last. 3 months of happiness felt like a lifetime, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The walk to the administrative building felt like a march to her own execution. Marcus walked beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence as a source of strength. Whatever was waiting for her, at least she wouldn't have to face it alone. The sight that greeted them in Administrator Mitchell's office was the last thing Lyralii had expected. Lord Kethrin Silvermoon, her father, sat rigidly in a chair that was clearly too small for his tall frame. His violet skin had a grayish pallor that spoke of stress and sleepless nights, and his silver hair, usually immaculately styled, looked as though he had been running his hands through it. "Father," Lyralii whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. Lord Silvermoon rose to his feet, his forearms moving in the formal gesture of greeting between equals that he had never used with her before. "Daughter." His voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the emotion he was trying to hide. "You look well." It was true. The months of outdoor work and simple, healthy food had given her a glow that the pampered luxury of her old life had never achieved. Her skin had regained its natural violet brilliance, and her silver hair now held highlights from the alien sun. She looked like a woman who was thriving, not like someone serving a prison sentence. "What are you doing here?" she asked, still not quite believing his presence was real. "May I?" Lord Silvermoon gestured toward Marcus with careful politeness. "I would like to speak with your husband." Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Lord Silvermoon, I am Marcus Chen." To Lyraliai's amazement, her father accepted the handshake, studying Marcus with the intense attention he usually reserved for important political figures. "Dr. Chen, I have come to discuss my daughter's situation." "Please sit down," Marcus offered, gesturing toward the chairs. "Would you like something to drink? The local fruit juice is actually quite pleasant." As Administrator Mitchell quietly prepared refreshments, Lord Silvermoon continued to study Marcus with growing confusion. This was clearly not what he had expected from a primitive human. Marcus's quiet confidence, his natural courtesy, his obvious intelligence, none of it fit the preconceptions about humans that were common in the inner worlds. "I have come," Lord Silvermoon said finally, "to discuss the possibility of dissolving this marriage." The words hit Lyraliai like a physical blow. She had been expecting arrest or additional punishment, not rescue, not the restoration of her old life, but the prospect of returning to Zephyria Prime, which should have filled her with joy, instead made her feel hollow and lost. "I see," Marcus said quietly. His voice was carefully neutral, but Lyraliai could see the tension in the line of his shoulders. "May I ask what has changed?" Lord Silvermoon shifted uncomfortably. "The situation that led to my daughter's punishment has become more complex. New information has come to light." "What kind of new information?" Lyraliai asked, finding her voice at last. Her father's composure finally cracked slightly. "The Terrari children you freed. They were not ordinary slaves destined for the pleasure districts." He paused, clearly struggling with what he had to say next. "They were the missing heirs to the Terrari royal house, kidnapped during a diplomatic mission and being transported for ransom." The silence in the room was deafening. Lyraliai felt the world tilt sideways as the implications hit her. "I what?" "Your actions prevented what would have been the most serious diplomatic incident in a century," Lord Silvermoon continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "The Terrari government has declared you a hero. They're demanding your return so they can honor you properly. But the Vorthak traitors," Lyraliai began weakly, "were operating outside the law. The slave transport was unauthorized, the children illegally acquired." Her father's voice held a note of bitter irony. "The very trade protocols you were accused of violating had already been violated by the traitors themselves." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "So, Lyraliai's conviction was based on false information?" "Not false exactly. Incomplete." Lord Silvermoon looked directly at his daughter for the first time since arriving. "The council acted on the information available at the time. The traitors had forged documents, false bills of sale. It appeared to be a legitimate transport that you had interfered with illegally. But now they know the truth," Administrator Mitchell said, looking up from her notes. "Yes, and the political situation has changed dramatically." Lord Silvermoon's voice took on the formal tone he used for official announcements. "The Terrari government is threatening to withdraw from all trade agreements with the inner worlds unless you are returned immediately to receive proper recognition for your heroic actions. The Vorthak Consortium is facing criminal charges and massive reparations payments." Lyraliai stared at her father, trying to process what he was telling her. "So, my conviction is overturned." "More than that. The council is prepared to offer you a full pardon and restoration of all family honors." Lord Silvermoon leaned forward earnestly. "You could come home, Lyra. You could have your old life back." The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and implication. Everything she had lost could be restored. Her title, her status, her place in society. The marriage that had been imposed as punishment could be dissolved as if it had never happened. She could return to the Crystal Towers and the life of privilege she had been born to. "What about Marcus?" she asked quietly. Lord Silvermoon glanced at Marcus with something that might have been respect. "Dr. Chen will be compensated, of course. And the human government has indicated they would welcome stronger diplomatic ties with our worlds." Marcus had been silent through most of this exchange, but now he spoke up. "The decision isn't mine to make. It's Lyraliai's choice." The simple statement seemed to surprise Lord Silvermoon more than anything else that had happened. In Zephyrian culture, a husband's consent would be required for any major decision affecting the marriage. The idea that Marcus would defer entirely to Lyraliai's wishes was almost incomprehensible. "Lyra," her father asked, using her childhood nickname for the first time in years. "What do you want to do?" It should have been an easy question. 6 months ago, the chance to return home with honor restored would have seemed like a miracle. But now, looking around the simple office at the people who had become her life, Lyraliai found that the answer wasn't simple at all. "I need time to think," she said finally. "This is a lot to process." Lord Silvermoon nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Of course. I will remain at the colony for a few days while you consider your options." As they left the administrative building, Marcus walked beside her in comfortable silence, giving her space to process what she had learned. The revelation that her actions had been heroic rather than criminal should have filled her with vindication and joy. Instead, she felt confused and conflicted in ways she couldn't explain. "You should go," Marcus said quietly as they reached their house. Lyraliai stopped walking and turned to look at him. "What?" "You should go back to your family. You have a chance to reclaim everything you lost. You'd be crazy not to take it." His words were generous, but she could see the pain he was trying to hide. Over the past 3 months, they had built something together, not a grand passion, but something perhaps more valuable, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The thought of losing that, of losing him, made her chest tighten with unexpected grief. "Is that what you want?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his own emotions. "What I want doesn't matter. This marriage was supposed to be your punishment, not your choice. Now you have a real choice. You should take it." That night, Lyraliai lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the colony settling into sleep around her. Through her window, she could see Marcus moving through his garden in the moonlight, tending to plants that needed attention regardless of the upheaval in their lives. She thought about her father's offer, about the life that awaited her on Zephyria Prime. Recognition as a hero, restoration of her family's honor, a return to the world of political intrigue and social privilege that had shaped her entire existence. It should have been everything she wanted. But when she tried to imagine leaving this place, leaving Marcus and the friend she had made, and the simple contentment she had found in daily life among the humans, she felt only emptiness. The crystal towers of her homeworld seemed cold and lifeless compared to the warm community she had discovered here. The question wasn't whether she could go back to her old life. The question was whether she wanted to. And as she watched Marcus carefully stake a young tree in the moonlit garden, she began to understand what her answer would be. The choice before her wasn't between punishment and freedom. It was between the life she had been born to and the life she had chosen to build. Between duty and love, between status and happiness, between the past and the future. And for the first time in her life, the choice was entirely her own to make. #married as punishment. She found unexpected kindness in a human. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the promise of another beautiful day on Kepler 442b. Lyraliai rose early and found Marcus already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with the quiet efficiency that had become so familiar to her. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the question in his green eyes that he was too kind to ask aloud. "Good morning," he said softly, offering her a cup of the local coffee substitute they had both grown fond of. "Good morning." She accepted the cup gratefully, using the warmth to steady her hands. "Marcus, we need to talk." He nodded, settling into the chair across from her with his own cup. "I figured we would. I've made my decision about my father's offer." Marcus went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "And I'm staying." The words came out more firmly than she had expected, carrying a conviction that surprised even her. "I'm staying here with you." The relief that flooded Marcus's face was so profound it took her breath away. He set down his cup with trembling hands and leaned back in his chair as if she had just lifted an enormous weight from his shoulders. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lyra, you could have everything back. Your family, your status, recognition as a hero. I could have my old life back," she corrected. "But I don't want it anymore." She leaned forward, trying to find the words to explain what she had discovered about herself over the long, sleepless night. That life was built on systems I can't support anymore. Slavery, rigid social hierarchies, the idea that some people matter more than others because of what family they were born into. Marcus listened intently as she continued. "Here, I'm valued for what I do, not what I am. You judge people by their character and their actions, not their bloodline or their wealth." She gestured toward the window, where the sounds of the colony beginning its daily activities drifted in on the morning breeze. "This is the kind of world I want to help build. But your family," Marcus began. "My father loves me, but he's never really known me," Lyralii said with a sad smile. "He loves the daughter he wanted me to be, obedient, conventional, focused on maintaining the social order. He's never understood the person I actually am." She stood up and moved to the window, looking out at the garden that had become such an important part of her new life. "You know what the strangest thing is? I've learned more about myself in 3 months as your wife than I did in 30 years as Lord Silvermoon's daughter." Marcus joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "What have you learned?" "That I like working with my hands. That I have opinions about things I never thought to question before. That I'm stronger than I thought I was." She turned to look at him directly. "That I'm capable of being happy in ways I never imagined." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Marcus opened it to find Lord Silvermoon standing on their doorstep, looking decidedly uncomfortable in the casual clothing he had acquired from the colony's clothing exchange. The sight of the powerful Zephyrian lord dressed in simple human work clothes was so incongruous that Lyralii had to bite back a smile. "Father, is everything all right? I was hoping," Lord Silvermoon said hesitantly, "that you might show me around your community. I find myself curious about how you live here." It was such an unprecedented request that Lyralii could only stare at him for a moment. In all her years growing up, her father had never shown interest in anything outside the rarefied world of interplanetary politics and noble society. "Of course," she said finally. "Marcus, would you join us?" The tour that followed was unlike anything any of them had expected. Lord Silvermoon, who had ruled worlds and commanded fleets, found himself fascinated by the simple efficiency of the colony's agricultural systems. He spent an hour in the greenhouse asking detailed questions about soil composition and crop rotation. He watched in amazement as Dr. Rodriguez treated an injured construction worker with the same careful attention she would give to a visiting dignitary. "There are no servants here," he observed as they visited the community workshops where colonists shared tools and expertise freely. "Everyone contributes according to their abilities," Marcus explained. "We don't have the luxury of a large population, so we can't afford to have anyone just sitting idle while others work. But who makes the decisions? Who maintains order? We have a council elected by the community," Lyralii said. "They serve for set terms and can be replaced if they don't serve the community's interests." She could see her father struggling to understand a system where authority came from consent rather than birth or conquest. The moment that changed everything came when they visited the colony school. A group of children of various species, human, Zinthari, even a few young Terrari who had arrived as refugees, were working together on a project to design a better water filtration system. They moved seamlessly between languages, helping each other with concepts that came more naturally to their different species. "How do you manage the conflicts between species?" Lord Silvermoon asked the teacher, a patient human woman named Sarah Kim. "What conflicts?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. "The children don't see species differences the way adults do. To them, Zara is just the girl who's really good at mathematics, and Chun is the boy who can make anything grow. Species is just another variation, like height or hair color." Lord Silvermoon watched the children work together for a long time, his expression thoughtful. When they finally left the school, he was unusually quiet. "This is what you choose over your homeworld," he asked Lyralii as they walked back through the colony center. This is what I choose over a system that would have let those Terrari children be sold into slavery, she replied firmly. A system that punished me for doing what I knew was right. The council acted on incomplete information. The council acted according to values I can't accept, Lyralii interrupted gently. They assumed that maintaining profitable trade relationships was more important than the lives of innocent children. Even if those children had been ordinary slaves rather than royal heirs, what I did would still have been right. That evening, Lord Silvermoon joined them for dinner in their simple home. Marcus had prepared a meal using vegetables from his garden and techniques he had learned from various members of the colony. As they ate, the conversation turned to the differences between human and Zephyrian society. Your species is very young, Lord Silvermoon observed. You've only been spacefaring for 50 years. Yet you seem to have developed social systems that avoid many of the conflicts that have plagued the galaxy for millennia. Maybe because we're young, Marcus suggested. We don't have thousands of years of tradition telling us that inequality is natural or that some species are inherently superior to others. Or maybe, Lyralii added, it's because humans seem to have this strange idea that every individual life has value regardless of what they can contribute to society. Marcus smiled at her. We prefer to think of it as enlightened rather than strange. Lord Silvermoon was quiet for a long moment, considering their words. Finally, he turned to Marcus. Dr. Chun, I owe you an apology. Sir, when I learned of this marriage, I assumed the worst about your motives. I thought perhaps your government was trying to gain some political advantage, or that you yourself might be seeking to profit from an association with my family. He paused, looking genuinely ashamed. I never considered that you might simply be a good man trying to help someone in need. Marcus was clearly uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what seemed right. That's exactly my point. Lord Silvermoon turned to his daughter. Lyra, I came here expecting to rescue you from a barbaric punishment. Instead, I find that you've discovered something I spent 60 years looking for and never found. What's that, Father? A way to live that aligns your actions with your principles. His voice was soft with something that might have been wonder. You found a society that rewards virtue rather than birth, that values contribution over status. He looked around their simple home with its handmade furniture and garden view. I thought this was a prison. Instead, it's the freest place I've ever seen. The next morning brought Lord Silvermoon's formal decision. He would return to Zephyria Prime, not with his daughter, but with a proposal for a new kind of diplomatic relationship between the human colonies and the inner worlds. A relationship based on shared values rather than political expedience. I will tell the council that my daughter has found her true calling among the humans, he announced at the spaceport as his ship prepared for departure. That she serves both our peoples better by building bridges between our species than she ever could by returning to court politics. He embraced Lyralii formally, then, in a gesture that surprised everyone present, offered Marcus the same honor. Take care of each other, he said quietly, and perhaps you might visit Zephyria Prime someday. I think there are people there who could benefit from seeing what you've built here. As the ship lifted off into the bright morning sky, Lyralii felt a weight she hadn't even known she was carrying finally lift from her shoulders. She was free, not just from her sentence, but from the expectations and limitations of her old life. So, Marcus said as they walked home through the colony paths, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Lyralii considered the question seriously. I want to help expand the agricultural program. Maybe work with Dr. Rodriguez on medical applications for some of the plants we've been developing. She paused. I want to write to other Zephyrian noble houses, tell them what I've learned here. Maybe convince some of them to support colonies like this one. Those are good goals, Marcus said with a smile. Long-term planning. I also want, she said, stopping in the middle of the path and turning to face him directly, to learn what it's like to be married to someone because I choose to be, not because a court ordered it. Marcus's smile widened into something bright and wonderful. I think I'd like that too. Good, Lyralii said, rising on her toes to kiss him gently, because I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting life. As they continued home together, the alien sun warm on their faces and the sounds of their thriving community all around them, Lyralii reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had been sent to this world as punishment for following her conscience. Instead, she had found a place where conscience was valued above convention, where love was freely given rather than politically arranged, where the future was built by people working together rather than being determined by the accidents of birth. It was, she thought, as Marcus began planning improvements to their garden, and she started sketching ideas for new community projects, exactly the kind of punishment she would wish on anyone fortunate enough to deserve it. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, but she had found her home among humans who dared to believe that it could be made better, one small act of kindness at a time. And in Marcus, she had found not just a husband, but a true partner in building the kind of world where children of all species could grow up free. It was, she decided, a very good place to start.